Most guys have no idea what their actual body fat percentage is, and it's almost always higher than you think. So let me show you what body fat percentages really look like from 30% all the way down to 10% so that you know what range you're in and what to actually target. But before we get into it, there are a few important things that you need to know about body fat percentages. One big reason that men stall and get frustrated or completely burn out is because they think they're leaner than they actually are, and they think they have less fat to lose than they actually do. There's also the skinny fat illusion. When you're not huge, you've got skinny arms and legs, but muscle mass is very low. So even with a small amount of fat, it pushes your body fat percent higher than you would actually expect. Another thing guys get attached to is an ideal weight. Like, I want to be 180 pounds or whatever. It's just some number. But to actually see muscle definition, you might need to drop another 10 or 20 pounds. And this creates a mental barrier because you think you'll be too light. And that's just self-sabotage, because to be heavier means staying fatter. So it's really about how you look and how you feel, not some random number on a scale or a body fat percentage. And to make it more confusing, two guys at the exact same body fat percentage can look noticeably different if one has more muscle, is taller, and carries less visceral fat. He's going to look leaner. And if the other has less muscle, more visceral fat, and he's shorter, he's going to look softer and smoother. So it's an important thing to understand that lowering your body fat will not magically fix a low amount of muscle. It simply reveals what you have. And when you're lean enough, your muscles will naturally look bigger, especially if you add a bit more size in that process. And if you don't know what body fat goal or weight to target, you can use my free calculator, linked right below the video. So let's take a look at what 30% body fat really looks like. If somebody says,
I'm fat,
then 30% body fat or above, generally what comes to mind. Obesity starts at 25% and above. And unfortunately, about 32% of Aussie adults are obese. And in the US, it's closer to 40%. Like, far out, man. Just let that sink in. It's almost half the population. So here's a few examples to give you a clear visual. This image here is close to 30% body fat. Based on a DEXA scan, it was 28.4%. And to contrast that, here's what about 40% body fat looks like. Big difference the higher it goes. Here's a few more examples in the 30 to 35% range. Now, you can't know the exact percentage to the decimal point without doing a DEXA scan, but these are very close to those ranges. So pause the video if you want to expect them a little bit closer. The problem is this high amount of fat is enough to impact almost everything: your energy, your testosterone, insulin resistance, thyroid function, libido, cholesterol, inflammation, just feeling hungry all the time. And long term, the risks of all major diseases and early death go up. The upside is that fat loss at this level is actually the easiest stage because there's so much room to move. You can make a lot of mistakes, follow average diets, even do poorly designed workouts and still lose a lot of weight. The downside is regaining this fat is also easier, especially if you've carried this level of fat for many years, due to the higher visceral fat content and the suboptimal impact on your hormones, lower muscle mass. And look, by health standards, nobody is considered healthy at this level, even if they eat salads every day. Well, except maybe sumo wrestlers, because they have a huge amount of muscle mass and a relatively low visceral fat from all their brutal training. So dropping from 30% to 25% isn't a hard phase. You don't need a strict ass diet or perfect macros, just eating mostly whole foods, moving around more, cutting out the obvious calorie bombs, which will still get you some solid progress. Small changes along the way will take you a long way without doing a massive overhaul. So let's move down to the edge of the obese range into the overweight territory. At around 25% body fat, most guys still will have a belly, soft arms and chest, and almost no visible muscle definition, especially on the abs. It's not obese, but it's obviously not lean. And this is the range where most men say,
yeah, I'm probably close to 20%.
But in reality, they're closer to 25%. Here are a few examples that are very close to below or above 25% that you can see on the screen. What I want to showcase is how people can look different at similar body fat percentages. At this level, fat loss can still be relatively fast and forgiving. But from here, lifestyle matters a lot more than just average workouts and short-term dieting if you want to drop down to that 20% or below. So consistency with food, having a good structure, regular movement is going to make a big difference to get you down to 20%. You can still build muscle at 25% and that will have a noticeable impact, but you won't really notice much of it until you get down to this next range. 20% is a big milestone for many guys and for good reason. This is where your body starts to show more muscular shape if you've been training correctly. I mean, you're obviously not Greg Plitt shredded, rest in peace, but you might see some slight V-taper coming through, the hips sitting out, the shoulders and chest definition coming through, but just not those crispy lines yet. So here are a few examples of 20% for different size and shaped men. 20% can also be a little bit deceiving. If you have a low muscle mass, then your shoulder to waist ratio won't be great. And if you have weaker back muscles and core, your posture can also make you just look a little bit worse than what you actually do. On the flip side, if you have above average muscle mass, 20%, and I almost don't want to say this, 20% can look healthy and fit if you have enough muscle and good posture. And 20% can be healthy if your visceral fat and metabolic health are under control. But the problem with 20% is that it is like a danger zone. It's like you're not fat, but you're also not lean. And this is where many guys get too comfortable. And you might be 20 to 30 pounds down, but still feeling all right. And then you ease up on your habits. And then before you know it, a couple of bad weeks, and boom, you're back to 25% or even higher. So 20% is not a finish line. It's a milestone on the way to 15%. And you may get stuck here because what got you to 20% is not guaranteed to get you down to 15%. You can't just wing it and smash yourself every day and starve yourself at the same time. And I'll explain why next. Hitting 15% is a big achievement for anybody, and you had to be consistent, track properly, tighten up your routine, and stick to the process for longer than what you probably expected. So here are some examples of what 15% looks like. This is also when guys realize they can't just wing it anymore. Like they actually need to know their numbers, their calories, their protein, their steps, their progressive overload with their training. And you have to be in a deficit without starving yourself. And every workout does need to count to get you stronger so you build more muscle. Otherwise, you're not going to get ahead. So it's a fine balance. And if you push too hard, you're going to burn out. But if you don't push hard enough, you're going to get stuck and struggle and be frustrated. So at 15%, you're not shredded, but you look better than 70% of men in Australia and the USA on the other side of the pond, even with an average level of muscle. The difference is massive if you have more muscle. Less muscle just makes you look a bit skinnier and still healthy. You'll see the outline of your abs, veins in your arms, sharper jawline, your shoulders will look more cut, definition through here, chest, your clothes are going to fit more properly. You might have to drop down a few sizes. T-shirts and pants are going to fit well. So you're going to get a lot of compliments. People will be shocked when they see you after not having seen you for a while. But they're also going to tempt you and say stuff like,
"You're looking really skinny. Eat some more. Have another round. Buy another beer."
Whatever it is, you'll be fine. This is a true test of your new identity and not falling back into the old you that you've left behind. So take all this as good feedback, even if it's annoying. At this level, energy is going to be a bit higher, more stable. You'll feel lighter, more athletic. You're probably going to sleep better. Your hormones are going to be more optimal and healthy. And it's one of the easiest body fat ranges to maintain year round without being this monk-like discipline level shredded. But 15% also creates a decision point. Do you start a clean recomposition phase and build more muscle, potentially going up 1 to 2% body fat to optimize muscle growth? Or do you push lower and find out what too lean actually looks and feels like for you? Keep this in mind as we move into the lower ranges. And if you're chasing a more ripped look, just like I was years ago, then here is what you need to focus on next. So here is where things start getting pretty serious.
I guess you could say things are getting pretty serious.
Once you get to around 11 to 13% body fat, I would call this ripped. Many movie stars are in or close to this range, like Daniel Craig in Bond. Everything is on show, but without looking like one of those human anatomy charts at your physio's office. There still may be a little bit of fluff covering the lower abs, but that's being a bit pedantic. It's pretty rare to see people walking around at 11 to 13% these days. Getting here is not easy for anyone, but it is simple. It just takes more time, more consistency in being in a deficit, and strategic breaks along the way so you can still eat out, travel, enjoy your life, and actually maintain it. So I've been at this range for about 10 years and it feels completely normal to me now. Gaining fat feels strange to me. But at the start, you do need time to adjust. If you don't acclimatize to being leaner as you go, then you won't notice when you start to regain the fat until it's too late. And suddenly you're back to 15% or higher. And eventually it's going to click that staying here really means adopting a new lifestyle. If you stop training, if you drop your daily movement, start eating shit every day, you're going to rebound back to 15% before you know it. And look, you can still eat shit, but just not every day in every meal in stupid fucking portions, right? What keeps you in 11 to 30% zone is making your eating, your training, your movement just part of who you are. It's what you do. You don't think about it. It's not a big deal anymore. Once you do this, you don't have to track every single meal forever because your habits and your routines are already dialed in. It's just what you do naturally, right? And maintaining it just becomes very simple. 11 to 13% body fat is not as forgiving as 15. But for a lot of guys, it's very rewarding and it's totally maintainable level if your habits and lifestyle is solid. But if you want to get next level shredded, let's explore that next. So at around 10% body fat or below, this is where that last bit of lower belly fat finally thins out and you start looking like a human anatomy chart at your physio's office. The full six pack is there, the lines are sharp and crispy like KFC chicken, and everything looks pure. This is like your Brad Pitt Fight Club level lean or even leaner. Here are a few examples, but 10% is also the hardest level to maintain with a normal, busy lifestyle if you ever get here. I honestly recommend doing it like once just to see what it looks and feels like, and then start a recomp phase, reverse diet phase, back to that 11 to 13%. Because this is where the lifestyle sacrifices really kick in and you start to feel the hunger between meals, your energy dropping, dips in strength, your hormones take a hit. Trust me, I know what this was like when I was at 6 to 7% body fat. It absolutely sucked. At very low body fat levels, you'll notice lower testosterone, more mood swings, stronger cravings, feeling irritable and flat all day. It's harder to focus and you just have this low key running on fumes feeling and you're always watching the clock for whenever the next meal arrives. You might look like an action figure, but you definitely don't feel like one. It's not something I ever want to do again, nor do I recommend going below 10% to anybody. And like I always say, look, find out for yourself, but nobody needs to reach sub 10%. And definitely do not rush it or starve yourself just to hit a body fat number. That's how people end up with eating disorders. Slow, steady, and structured keeps it safe and sustainable. And personally, sitting around 13% all year is better than being at 10% just for 1 month or less. So after covering all this, what body fat percentage should you actually target? If you're at 30% and above, your next milestone should be to get to 25%. If you are roughly at 25%, your next target is to push for 20. If you're at 20%, then you can definitely get to 15. And if you're already at 15, I would personally test dropping to around 11% and then reversing back to around 13. See how you feel from there. Ultimately, it's your choice, but I strongly recommend doing this in phases. Give yourself double the amount of time you think it will take so that you can factor this into real life. And then you'll also stabilize your habits and your lifestyle at each level so that you don't trigger this deprivation and then rebound cycle before pushing further ahead. And if you want help getting six-pack lean, just like my clients, in a sustainable, data-driven, phased approach with direct accountability from me, you can work with me one-on-one inside my metabolic recomp method. Tap the link in the description to learn more about it. Or if you prefer going on this journey yourself, you can get all my systems and my frameworks inside the Business Body Blueprint routine. Link is also in the description below. Then go watch this video next where I'll walk you through the correct way to cut down to 15% body fat.